What's the name of that award again? I thought it was a typo. I thought it was Tony Houlihan. No, I guess not. Well, regardless of the name, but the really important thing is who we're honoring tonight, and it's a real privilege for me to be able to give this award in the name of the conference to Sibella Kraus. I cannot think of another person that is more deserving of this award and more and really embodies what the spirit of what this award is all about. But there's a bonus in all of this, and that is that for me, being able to give her this award, because she has been one of my strong colleagues in the past, but also a very good friend. So why does Sibella richly deserve this award, other than the fact that she is my friend? Well, her written bio lays out a long list of her accomplishments, including a number of new initiatives that were developed by her over the years, initiatives like the Tasting of Summer Produce and the Ferry Plaza Farmers Market and Public Market. This is Sibella the activist, making things happen, things that will better the lives of family farmers, but also open the avenues of access for consumers to healthy, fresh, sustainable, and high-quality produce. But there's another Sibella. No, it's not the secret Sibella. It's really known, but it's not one that's often given as much limelight as it should, and that is Sibella the visionary. You see, behind almost all the actions that she has taken that I can think of stands a vision of what can be, a vision of what should be, and a vision of what is needed to expand those opportunities for family farmers in the marketplace. But her vision-driven ideas were not always met with enthusiastic support. And I can remember being in a meeting when she gave a very passionate explanation of her vision for what could be, and a number of people politely clapped. And yet, fortunately, Sibella isn't one of these visionaries that throws out ideas and lets them land on the table and see who's going to pick them up. No, she is committed and gets involved. She promotes what she believes in, and she puts her life on the line. You know, some 50 years ago when I was a student at UC Davis, I should admit that, my professors in Ag Econ, one of them said, and he had the support of others, that said, by the end of the decade, the end of the 60s, there would be no small farms left in California. That farming and the marketing system would be controlled by a small group of large corporations, mainly from the top down, vertical integration. They would be contracting with farmers to grow what was needed. Then in the supermarkets, there would be two kinds of apples, a red apple and a green apple. That tomatoes would all only come in 4-packs of clamshell plastic, and so forth. Fortunately, they didn't count on two things. Number one was a stubbornness and the integrity and the hard work of small farmers. And the second is people like Sibella Kraus, who said, there's another way. Sibella, we want to thank you very much for all that you have done and all you're continuing to do. And this award is a token of our appreciation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much, Tom. I am really deeply honored to be receiving this award, especially the Tom Howell Award from somebody who I so admire for his way of being in this community, for his humility, for how personable he is, how effective he is, and how totally passionate he is to the cause of family farmers. We go way back to a little house on Russell Street in the early 80s when I think it was then the California Association of Family Farmers had a little office there, and so did the steering committee for sustainable agriculture that had seduced me at La Honda when I went there as a student and suddenly got swept into this tribe of subversive organic farmers and instantly jumped in, full feet. And I also want to thank all of you, so many of you who I've had the privilege and joy and pleasure of working with over many years as farmers and market managers and cooperative extension specialists. I should say that this slideshow that you're watching captures about 5 or 6 years of the tasting of summer produce from 1983 to 89, and many of you were involved in it in various years. So I'm not going to speak to that slideshow, and if I'm boring, you can always watch it, so that was part of the reason. But it also really captures, I think, the essence of what I want to talk about briefly tonight, and that is that the cause of family farmers isn't really just a rural concern. It's a social-wide concern, and maybe especially needs to be the concern of people who live in cities, which are far more populous than the people who live and work on farms. So I want to give a little bit of background. I was drawn into my work about 30 years ago, and first started out as a cook at Chez Panisse. So many of you, well, probably all of you know well of Alice and her passion, and she's the kind of person who says, there is a better bean out there. I know there is. I tasted one in France 6 years ago, and I can't really go anything here in California. And so I started when I was a cook being a part-time forager at Chez Panisse, and in 1983 started a project called the Farm Restaurant Project. And Chez Panisse and 5 other restaurants gave me a little bit of money, and I had let's see, what did I was driving, like an old Rambler, I think I was driving around in those days. And so set out, because I'd started to meet a few farmers through the Steering Committee for Sustainable Agriculture, and set out to see who are these farmers and can't we sort of connect them in better with these restaurants. And you have to remember that the context at this time was the following. Lettuce, 24 heads of lettuce, came in a 40-pound box. And when we got that box at Chez Panisse, we would take 80% of that into the garbage can, and only 20% would come to the table. It was a time when specialty meant it come wrapped in tissue paper from either Italy, blood oranges, or from Belgium, the Belgian endive. It meant beans, green beans meant sort of fattish KYs, and tomatoes meant cherries, romers, or slicers. So as I started meeting farmers, I found them so willing to say, well, sure, we can pick that little fruit a little bit riper, or that zucchini a little bit smaller, or hey, we'd be glad to pick lettuces 4 weeks earlier than we have been and charge the same price or even more. And folks who are saying, you know, I've been growing this 8 varieties of heirloom Japanese eggplant, and you know, I just grow them because I'm a passionate seed saver. And then the idea that I could hook them up with chefs who knew what the flavors and attributes of all 8 of these heirloom Japanese eggplants might be, that was a really tremendous joy. So after Chez Panisse, I went to work developing a specialty crop division at a small wholesale produce company, Greenleaf Produce Company, which has since become, I think, something like a $50 million a year business. And then at the same time, or a few years later, I also started working for the San Francisco Chronicle as a staff writer, taking over Joe Carcione's beat as the greengrocer. And somehow at the same time, I managed to work on this tasting of farm produce with David Vischer and Catherine Brandel and many of you here. It was a tremendous project that really brought together extension master gardeners, the culinary associations, and that was really its power as a kind of a tremendous collaborative project. So writing for the Chronicle and working for Greenleaf Produce Company, I had the occasion to visit hundreds and hundreds of farms all over California. And all of these places I went to, I just found myself wishing that, I don't know, people, the world, could be at these very interesting places with me. I mean, this is where I discovered, you know, Susanville is a whole area that was growing all these wonderful potatoes, and would go up to a little Feather River Canyon and find these beautiful peach orchards, and would go down to farms in Fresno where the front yard was what they were growing for the market. And I'd say, but then they'd take me around the back and say, oh, but these are the tomatoes we grow for our family. And I'd say, that's what we want. I'm sure there must be a way to pack those up and bring those into market. And some of the farms were really small. A farm very close to here really touched me. It was a 5-acre farm in which a Palestinian fellow was growing just what his extended family in the Bay Area really treasured: white mulberries, Russian figs, and a special kind of game bird. Now, he told me at the time that he'd smuggled these game birds in under his coat during a different area, and of course I was happy to believe him. And then there were the large farms, these extraordinary farms like, you know, McCormick Sheep and Grain, 4,000 acres up in the Delta that had been in their family for, oh, I don't know, 150 years. Some of these trips to farms were difficult. Trips down to the Willie Farm in Clovis, you know, a year or so, and them telling me excitedly about them discovering from this wonderful old Arkansas farmer, Mr. Poe, how they would rotate their crops in with beans, and this was really exciting. But then a year later, here comes the tarmac and covered that farm. And other farms I'd go to visit, like the Heath Farm I remember up around Orland, in one of those terrible winters which had had catastrophic freezes, and every orange was encased in ice, and there were icicles dripping from the trees. And this, too, was a story which I felt really needed to be told.